What is up, guys? It is Quinn here, and in this video, I'm going to be running through my Week 18 running back start sits. Now, I'm guessing most of you guys, kind of saw what went down on Monday Night Football. It does feel kind of weird, recording this video after, that super brutal thing that happened. I'm still going to be putting out my running back and wide receiver videos, but obviously, just hoping for the best with that whole situation. Obviously, Week 18, brings on its own challenges for fantasy football. That's why, most leagues are ending in Week 17, but I know some of you guys do have Week 18 championships, so there are some added layers. It's honestly probably the toughest week to do start sits, especially early on in the week, maybe aside from like Week 1 where we don't really know anything, but, there are certain teams that have clinched, certain teams that they know they're making the playoffs, but maybe they could move up a spot or two, or move down a spot or two, and so we don't exactly know which players are going to be starting. So it is, like I said, kind of tough to do start sits. I will say that this week I'm going to be doing my running back and wide receiver start sits. Those are coming out on Tuesday. Wednesday I'll have my quarterback and tight ends, and then that's going to be it for me for the week. But I will continue to respond to comments, up until the Saturday and Sunday games. So, if something changes, we find out a team's starting players, sitting players. If you want to, keep asking the same question, as things change, I will make sure to continue to respond to you guys. If you guys are new to the channel, maybe I'm one of the only people putting out Week 18 content. The way I structure this video, I go through every single matchup, so all 16 games, and then I list every fantasy relevant player as either a start, fringe option, or a sit. The starts are the players you feel very confident throwing into your lineup. Fringe options, more of like your running back threes, your flex plays, and then sits. These are guys you want on your bench. So let's start it off with the Chiefs-Raiders matchup. And I feel comfortable playing both of these running backs. Jerick McKinnon obviously has been balling out, over the last 5-6 weeks. Isaiah Pacheco still has a very solid role on the ground. Plus, this is a great matchup against the Ravens, who have been very susceptible to opposing running backs. Then on the other side, even though the Raiders aren't really playing for anything here, we saw them use Josh Jacobs in a large capacity in Week 17. I don't see why he's still not involved in this game, so he would be a start for me. Then looking at the Titans-Jaguars game, this is, obviously very important. It's going to decide the division, so I think Derrick Henry will be back and playing. He's definitely a start. And then on the other side, we saw Travis Etienne. I think he only played one half. He did have a pretty big half, but then they sat him for the second half. Here, he's obviously going to be playing, having that full workload. He's a start for me. Sitting JaMychal Hasty, who also, actually saw a decently solid fantasy day. Then moving over to the Sunday slate, we have the Buccaneers taking on the Falcons. Now, for the Buccaneers, they're in this spot where they have locked up their division, and, they can't really move up or down. Their record is so bad, they're locked into that, I think it would be the 4 seed. So you would assume that they would be sitting all their starters. I do think there could be an argument to be made that they should be playing their starters at least for a little bit. This is an offense that has looked pretty lackluster all season long. They really kind of came alive against the Panthers. It's possible they want to go out there and get some more reps. The problem is that I could see them doing that for a quarter, maybe even a half. I cannot see them having Tom Brady out there late in the third, fourth quarter. So I'm going to have all these running back as sits. It's possible they start off with Fournette, Rachaad White, and then second half they turn to Keyshawn Vaughn, Giovanni Bernard. It's really just a situation that I would be trying to avoid. Now on the other side for the Falcons, kind of an interesting update in the Algier-Patterson split. So I kind of assumed Algier would be the better play here. I think he was, looking in hindsight at the usage. Algier saw 34 snaps to Patterson's 32, so pretty close to 50-50 there. We saw Algier take 20 of the carries to Patterson's 9, so significant edge there, for Tyler Algier. The interesting thing was in the receiving department. So Patterson was targeted 8 times to Algier's 1, so that would make you think that Algier, was just getting all the work on the ground, and then Cordero Patterson was dominating the routes run. That's really not how it played out. Patterson did lead in routes run at 18, but Algier ran 11. So, 8 targets in 18 routes. That's pretty crazy. Algier, 1 target in 11 routes. I would still expect Patterson to be the guy with more receiving work, but I do think Algier getting the edge in the carries, the significant edge, does make him the much better play. I do think the Bucs could also be resting some key defensive pieces. They've had guys banged up. Vita Vea has been banged up, obviously huge in the run game. They've had some corners, Carlton Davis, Jamel Dean. These guys have been dealing with injuries. Winfield has been banged up. So I would not be surprised if the Bucs rest a lot of their defensive players, or they're only playing a quarter or two. And so I do think Algier is a decent start this week. And then I even think Patterson is a solid fringe option. I do currently believe the Falcons are the betting favorite, which would obviously indicate that Vegas assumes that the Bucs are going to be benching some players here. For the Patriots, this is kind of a rough turn of events here. Ramondre has been a really strong RB1 basically all season long, I think starting week 3, week 4. And this week was a massive turn for the worse in that department. I have him as a fringe option here. We saw Damian Harris make his return, and I really thought Ramondre would keep his workload. He did not. He only played 5 more snaps than Harris. Damian Harris actually outcarried him at 9-8. And then they also had a pretty even split in routes run with Stevenson at 17, Harris at 14. That's really, really tough for Ramondre Stevenson. I thought at the very least, he would have a pretty solid command over that third down work. I think he did play a lot of the third downs, but just the routes run in general. You also add in that this is a tough matchup against the Bills. It's tough to feel super confident about either of these guys. I do still prefer Ramondre, but I don't think he's a locked-in start anymore, unfortunately for Stevenson owners. Now for the Bills, with this game not really happening, this is a backfield that has been up in the air all season long. So without actually knowing the splits here, I really don't even feel comfortable making a educated guess on this one. Now moving over to another divisional game, we have the Vikings taking on the Bears. And I believe the Vikings are in a spot where they could, rest their players. I think they have a shot to move up, but I think they would need a win. The 49ers would be a loss or need a loss. Doesn't seem super likely. So I have Dalvin Cook here as a start. Obviously, if they're, resting their starters, Cook might not play. I think, honestly, Alexander Mattison could be a solid option. He'll probably see a huge workload. Obviously, the offense is going to be much worse without Kirk playing. Jefferson, Thielen, those guys probably not going. But the Bears' defense is pretty rough. So I still think with the volume, Alexander Mattison would have to be a start option for me. And then for the Bears, I expect them to keep rolling with their starters. So David Montgomery is going to be a start. Khalil Herbert as a sit. Then we have the Ravens taking on the Bengals. For the Ravens here, I have J.K. Dobbins as a fringe option, and some people may be a little surprised by that because we did see Dobbins take 17 of the 20 running back carries. I was super excited to see that. Kind of looked like he was running away with that backfield. Looked great in those opportunities, rushed for 93 yards. The problem is, after the game, John Harbaugh comes out and basically says, Gus Edwards didn't play enough. He needs to be out there more. He was kind of frustrated with the way that split played out. So not what you want to hear. It definitely seems like Harbaugh wants it to be more of a 60-40 split moving forward. I do think this could be a key game in the division. I believe if the Bengals lose to the Bills, if they make that game up, still not really sure what's happening there. But I do believe this game could be for the division. So I think both these teams are going to be trying to take the dub here. I have Dobbins as a fringe play, Gus Edwards as a sit. And then for the Bengals, even though they didn't play that Bills game, barring some freak thing happening to Joe Mixon, he's definitely going to be a start. Then we have the Lions taking on the Packers. Interesting matchup with some playoff implications here. And after that game in Week 17 against the Bears, I feel like a lot of people probably feel really strong about both DeAndre Swift and Jamal Williams. They both had massive games, but I do think we have to look at that matchup because that was a juicy lineup against the Bears. We knew the Lions were going to put up points. Bears also can't stop running backs, so it really was a perfect storm for both those guys to ball out. The problem is, their roles and usage didn't really change. Obviously, they all saw more opportunities because they were ahead. They got to get these very efficient touches with some touchdown upside. But, per usual, Williams led in carries. He also led in snaps. And then we see DeAndre Swift leading in the receiving work. Even though Jamal Williams is coming off that big game, I have him as a sit here. Now, if this is a situation where a lot of these top running backs are sitting out, not playing, then I could see him getting bumped up to a fringe option. But prior to that Week 17 game, Jamal Williams had been struggling. He had 4 straight games under 10 points. He actually had 3 straight under 4. So he had been very, very touchdown dependent. It's not like this is a cakewalk matchup against the Packers. So I would, be weary starting Jamal Williams. And then for DeAndre Swift, I have him as a fringe option, so I do think he is the better option in this backfield. And then for the Packers, we actually saw Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon have pretty similar workloads. Dillon played on slightly more snaps, and then he ran 2 more routes. You'd like to see Aaron Jones get that edge in their receiving department. But then we saw Aaron Jones slightly lead in both carries and targets. I think both these running backs are going to be solid RB2 plays this week going up against the Lions. Now moving over to the Texans Colts game. Per usual, I'm just fading this Texans running back room with no Dameon Pierce. I'm just not interested in like this Royce Freeman, Dare, Rex Burkhead committee. Just, not super into it. And then for the Colts, I think Zach Moss is a pretty interesting option here. Right now, I have him as a fringe option. I could consider moving him up to a start, if we do hear about some guys potentially sitting out. He took 15 of the 24 running back carries, and then the Texans have allowed the most points per game to the running back position. The problem here, and the thing I'd be concerned about, is that if he gets that workload again, like if he's getting 20 carries in this matchup, I think he's going to produce. The problem is, like, I wouldn't be shocked if we go out in week 18 and we see like Jordan Wilkins leading this backfield or Deion Jackson more involved. It just doesn't feel like his role is super set. So that's the concern I have there with Zach Moss. Then looking at the Jets-Dolphins game, this Jets backfield devolved into a full-on committee, also in a game that they really struggled offensively. So I don't really know how to read this backfield. I think the best, path forward is just avoiding it. So sitting Ty Johnson, sitting Zonovan Knight, and sitting Michael Carter. Then looking at the fringe here for these Dolphins guys, Jeff Wilson and Raheem Mostert, a pretty solid 50-50 split. I believe Mostert was the guy who got into the end zone, so his fantasy numbers look better. But in reality, their workloads were very similar. I like this offense more. Probably a tough matchup here against the Jets. I don't believe the Jets are crazy locked down against running backs, but obviously a very solid defense overall. So these guys are going to be more of like low-end fringe options for me. Then we have the Panthers taking on the Saints. We saw both Deonta Foreman and Chuba Hubbard kind of fall on their faces against the Bucs. We knew that was in the range of outcomes. Bucs have been pretty solid against the running backs, especially over the last, 2-3 years. I still think Foreman every week has that high ceiling where he can burst out for 140 yards on the ground, score a touchdown or two. So I have him as a fringe option. I do think he's the better option over Chuba Hubbard. And then for the Saints, I'm going to continue to fire up Alvin Kamara. Workload continues to be solid. Just isn't really breaking through with the touchdowns. It's just something every week that's missing. I still think he's a solid running back to play, maybe even top 12 guy with some guys potentially sitting out. Looking at this Giants-Eagles matchup, from what I've heard and read, I believe the Giants are locked into their playoff spot. I don't think they can move up or down. They've clinched, so I don't think there's any need for them to play a guy like Saquon Barkley. So he's going to be a sit for me. Now they could, roll with Matt Breida as the workhorse. The problem is, like, without Daniel Jones going up against the Eagles, who do need to win this game, I just think it would be gross from the Giants. So I'm just going to be sitting this Giants running back room. And then for the Eagles, firing up Miles Sanders here. Been a little disappointing as of late, but the workload's still there. He always has that potential to go for 100 yards and a touchdown or two. Looking at the Browns taking on the Steelers. Steelers and Mike Tomlin trying to get to another winning season kind of out of nowhere. For the Browns here, Nick Chubb's solid game, just didn't get into the end zone. I'm going to continue to fire him up here. They haven't really shown that they're going to shut him down or anything. And then for the Steelers, continue to fire up Najee Harris. This is a game that the Steelers need to win, so they should be, rolling with their guys. And then sitting Jaylen Warren, also a solid matchup there against that Browns defense. Then we have the Cowboys taking on the Commanders. For the Cowboys, this is a game that they need to win. If the Eagles lose, they're going to be able to slide into that one spot. So I think Pollard and Zeke are both solid plays here. And then for the Commanders, we did see Brian Robinson take a pretty solid workload this past week with Gibson out. B-Rob took 24 of the 33 running back carries. The problem is this is a tough matchup against the Cowboys. He's basically a zero in the receiving department. So I'm just going to be sitting all of these Commander running backs in the Chargers-Broncos matchup. If Austin Eckler's playing, we're getting the news. He's the guy. Obviously, fire that man up. And then for the Broncos, we have Murray and Chase Edmonds in a pretty strong split. So both those guys are going to be sits for me. In the Rams-Seahawks matchup, I like both of these running backs as starts. Cam Akers has really been a workhorse over the last few weeks and has, kind of shown out in those opportunities. And then for the Seahawks, Kenneth Walker continues to get a very solid role on the ground. Just hasn't had the great touchdown luck as of late. Then looking at the Cardinals taking on the 49ers here. Believe this is the final matchup. For the Cardinals, I have James Conner listed as a start here. The problem is he left the Week 17 game with injury, so not really sure how they're going to play that. There's always the possibility that the Cardinals just don't really want to risk it. Believe he's on contract for another year or two. So why are they going to run him out there when he's injured? So maybe they pivot. If they pivot, I don't really want to be dealing with a Clement, Keontae Ingram committee against the 49ers where the 49ers are going to be trying to win this game. So, If Connor plays, I think he's a start, barring, some committee news. And if he doesn't, I'm just going to be avoiding this backfield. Obviously, a very, very tough matchup against the 49ers. But a workhorse James Conner, even in a bad matchup, that's still someone who I'm willing to play. And then for the 49ers, hearing Christian McCaffrey is day-to-day with an ankle injury. If they're going for this game, I think they need to win to lock out the Vikings. So, if they're playing him, he's definitely going to be a start for me. Even if this is a spot where it's like we're thinking he's playing 3/4, 2.5, I still think you honestly play him because he can rack up points in a hurry. So that's going to wrap it up for every single Week 18 matchup. If you all enjoyed the content, do me a huge favor, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. If you want to see the wide receiver start sit, that's going to be posted on my channel. So go check it out. Thank you guys for tuning in, all the way until the last week of the season. I really do appreciate it. So thank you guys again, and I will see you in the next one.